All right, guys, this is Norwell Central coming back at you with another YouTube video. And I really appreciate all the love and support so far. I took a small little break yesterday, but I did do some streaming on College Football 27. Go check out the live stream if you haven't been able to watch that. I got a couple of, let's just say I got dominated by Ohio State and then turned around and beat a Mississippi State team. So I'm still getting used to the game. I'm hopefully going to be able to have a Dynasty series out pretty soon on Florida State. Just kind of getting my feet wet on this game so far, but definitely something that I want to get more into as well as doing these YouTube videos on top of it. But I really appreciate all the love and support on my social media platforms, my Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, you name it, I got it. I just want to build a positive community of Florida State football fans and being able to share something that's so meaningful to me, even though the program has really been a struggle lately. 6 losing seasons in 8 years. We definitely want to see Florida State back on top before we know it, and I hopefully think that it's going to be in 2026. But let's go ahead and get straight into it. So this is a pivotal year for Florida State, obviously for many reasons. Mike Norvell is looking like he is on the hot seat on many boards. A lot of people think he might even be fired. Probably should have been fired even last year after the Stanford debacle. But I do think that there is opportunity for him to be successful. And I even talked about it before. Tony White's defense can and will take a step forward in 2026. And I do think there is a lot of good pieces on this team, starting off with a linebacker in Chris Jones. I think this is a guy that Ole Miss thought they had signed and actually did sign in the transfer portal, and then he was able to come over to Florida State. Had over 110 tackles last year, and I think he is a guy that you want to have in your system specifically. It almost reminds me of a Tatum Bethune that we had a couple years ago. I do think the Florida State linebacker core was not the greatest in the world last year, but I do think they have potential behind him. But you can look at a guy like Omar Graham and Blake Nicholson and other guys like that who I think can be able to take a step forward. But we've heard it before. Those guys are seniors now at this point. They have to step up and they have to do what is done right now. And I think this is going to be a big factor for Tony White as they kind of figure out that multiple 3-3-5 defense and being able to finally get accustomed to that scheme. But I don't really want to talk about the linebackers as much because I know it's a popular play. Let's talk about the defensive end spot. And everyone talks about the Desir twins. The Desir twins are something that, everyone talks about because they had the NIL dispute coming into last offseason. They were able to reach a deal with Florida State, and now you're back in Tallahassee. That is a landscape of college football nowadays. It is a mess. Who knows what's going to happen with the next couple of years? I know this game is almost like who pays more. You're seeing a Texas Tech getting involved. You're seeing Miami even being competitive now at this point and getting to a championship contender type of state that I never thought Miami was going to get to. But I do think Florida State can be able to have some effective pieces, specifically at the defensive line. We heard this 2 years ago with Nick Saban talking about Florida State was one of the better defensive linemen that they've seen, and we underperformed. Last year, we had guys like James Williams that come over to reunite with a Terrence Knighton as well as a Tony White from Nebraska. And he was unfortunately unable to really do much. He had 1.5 sacks and then transfers out of the program. You thought there were going to be so many different pieces with that group. And realistically, you're seeing the top sack getter was Mandrell Desir. He had 6.5 sacks last year. He had 5 sacks in 6 games to end the year. And it was really something spectacular to see because you wanted to see development specifically from guys that you recruited out of high school. You saw that. But then you see guys like Barker, who had 3.5 sacks last year. You had Stephon Thompson, who had 3.5 sacks. He's gone. Daniel Lyons, who they're very high on, had 2 sacks last year. And then James Williams had 1.5. So you're looking at most of those guys and you're like, man, they didn't really have much production last year except for Mandrell Desir. And you got that right. You're hoping that his twin brother Daryl Desir gets a little bit more under his realm. But at the point of attack is you got to have Rylan Kennedy, the Texas A&M transfer, to be able to step up and be that guy. Now, the problem is he's a senior. There's no time to get adjusted to the college game. He's been in college for longer than this point. He needs to be able to be productive. And yes, he was a reserve at Texas A&M because I do think there were some talented pieces in that bunch that really it was hard to kind of get a grasp on getting that starting position. But he only made 1 start in 3 seasons at Texas A&M. That is a lot of pressure to put on yourself to potentially be a starting defensive end. He only contributed 40 tackles last year, 5.5 sacks, tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks, 4 passes defended. I do think that this is a guy that can be and will be a pivotal part in Florida State's defense, but you almost have to be. You're 6'3", 251 pounds, and you're needing to be able to step up. It's a dangerous proposition to have. They think everyone's going to be like a Jared Verse, and even a Jermaine Johnson. Everyone can't be like that in the transfer portal, but you almost force him to be that way. The good news is Florida State was able to get a lot of defensive linemen in this class, 8 to be exact. And I think Florida State's really following the blueprint now of finally getting to get some competent defensive linemen in this class so that way they can be able to develop and get some of those guys up to speed. So by the time they're redshirt sophomores or redshirt juniors, they can be able to contribute at a high all ACC type of caliber level. And I think it definitely can be factored in what Florida State can do. Now, Demonte Diggs is another guy who possibly can be able to kind of step up there. Deontay McCray is also another guy I like as a kind of a hybrid defensive end, defensive tackle. There's a lot of guys in the defensive end room and defensive tackle room that can be able to be a factor. But the problem is, I mean, you almost set yourself up for Rylan Kennedy to be that guy. If he's not that guy, you might have disappointed this season. So really, I mean, you're starting off that game against New Mexico State. He's got to factor in early because guess what? In week number 2, technically week number 1 for the college football season, you're playing SMU on Labor Day night in a standalone game. You have to have pressure on the quarterback and Kevin Jennings, who loves to run. So Rylan Kennedy is going to have to be a guy that's there. You can no longer hear about Rylan Kennedy's potential and how he's going to be in future generations or future years for Florida State because guess what? He's here. We need him to perform right now. And I think it's coming to a point now where you want to see those 2 sacks turn into 7, 8. But that's a huge jump for someone that's only having 3.5 career sacks. So really, Florida State is in a heap of trouble if they're having just to rely on him. Obviously, he is a very, very talented player, but you need to have Rylan Kennedy being able to step up. Will he be able to do so? That's another thing to be able to testimony for at this point. But I do think that Florida State is going to have some guys like that being able to step up. And Rylan Kennedy is probably one of the more important pieces on this defense because you can have a great secondary, you can have great linebackers, but you need pressure up front to be able to force offenses into throwing turnovers that you want to have. And also having the linebackers be able to stop up and run support if your defensive lineman is up to stopping the run gaps. But I really appreciate all the love and support so far on my Instagram account. I just wanted to kind of get on here and talk about Rylan Kennedy, who I think is a very important piece to what Florida State brings to the table in 2026. Let me know your thoughts on Rylan Kennedy. Are you buying the hype and what he's going to be for Florida State this season? Are you thinking it's just going to be another James Williams clone or even a Jason Jenkins? What do you think is going to happen with Rylan Kennedy? What is a safe sack number for you? I mean, I think a safe sack number might be around 6. It's going to almost have to be. What do you think Florida State's going to be able to do with this? Do you think the Twins are going to emerge as more than that? This is a very loaded question, but let me just know your thoughts on the defensive line. It's a very interesting group that Florida State's definitely going to have to succeed on if Florida State's defense wants to be any kind of successful this season. And I definitely think Tony White's going to need it. But I appreciate everything, and as always, go Noles.